6 weeks passed. 6 weeks during which Claire poured everything she had into the Hanu collection work, into every project Ms. Park assigned her, into becoming so undeniably excellent that even the most stubborn skepticism would eventually have to make room for acknowledgement. She revised her Bajogakent concept 3 times, each iteration more sophisticated than the last, more rooted in genuine cultural research that went far beyond aesthetics. She also spent those 6 weeks learning the geography of Cha Christian. Not intentionally, not the way you study something you are drawn to, more the way you learn the location of a storm system, situational awareness, self-preservation. She learned that he arrived at the office before 7 most mornings and rarely left before 9 at night. She learned that he took his coffee without anything, which struck her as both predictable and somehow telling about a man who denied himself comfort as a matter of principle. She learned that, when he reviewed work he found genuinely impressive, his right hand made a brief, barely perceptible movement. A single tap of his index finger against whatever surface was nearest, as if recording a private acknowledgement he was not prepared to voice. She noticed that tap once, while he was looking at a design board that Ms. Park's team had produced, and she filed it away the way she filed everything about this man, carefully, without sentiment, purely as information. What she was not prepared to file away, what refused to be categorized and stored neatly, was the incident in the sample room on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in her 8th week. Claire had been in the sample room alone, working through fabric sourcing for the concept she was still quietly, persistently developing. She did not hear Cha Christian enter. She was beginning to understand that was simply how he moved through the world, gravity without sound, and she became aware of him only when she turned and found him standing 4 feet away, looking not at her, but at the fabric spread across the work table. What he was looking at was a length of hand-woven kente cloth she had shipped from her uncle's weaving studio in Kumasi. Gold and rich terracotta and ivory, geometric precision in every thread, the kind of textile that contained generations of encoded meaning. Beside it, she had laid a piece of traditional Korean silk in cream and soft gold, and the conversation between them on that table was undeniable, even to eyes determined not to see. Claire watched him look at it, watched the professional assessment happen again, involuntary, impossible to suppress. And she watched something else happen beneath that, something that flickered through his expression so quickly she might have imagined it. Something that looked almost like wonder before it was buried beneath whatever fortress he maintained in place of emotion. The tonal relationship works, he said, to the fabric, not to her. Yes, she said simply, I thought so too. A silence. He reached out and touched the edge of the kente cloth. A single, brief touch of his fingertips to the woven surface, and his hand hovered for just a fraction of a second longer than the gesture required, as if the texture had said something unexpected. Then he pulled his hand back, straightened, became again the sealed, impenetrable version of himself. Don't let the sourcing costs get out of control, he said, and walked out. Claire stood there for a long moment after he left. Her heart was doing something she refused to investigate closely. She told it firmly to stop and went back to work. The break came, as breaks often do, from an unexpected direction. It was the end of Claire's 3rd month at Christian Holdings. The company was hosting a charity gala, one of Seoul's major social events, raising funds for an arts education program that Ms. Park had helped establish. All staff were expected to attend. The aesthetic division was responsible for several elements of the event design, which meant Claire had been involved in the planning for weeks and understood every detail of how the evening was constructed. She wore a dress she had made specifically for the occasion, a column silhouette in deep, warm amber silk, with hand-applied kente pattern beading along the neckline that caught light like scattered embers. Her curls were at their most glorious, full, voluminous, perfectly defined, cascading down past her shoulders with the kind of abundant, unapologetic beauty that she had spent years learning to offer to the world without apology. Gold jewelry, amber heels. The full architecture of herself, assembled with care. Claire arrived and moved through the event with the professional ease of someone who knew the room, literally, in this case, having helped design the flower arrangements and lighting scheme. She spoke with clients, with partner organizations, with fellow designers. She was, by any measure, doing exactly what she was there to do. And then she was standing near the bar, speaking with Mr. Lee about a textile sourcing question, when she became aware of Cha Christian entering the event space. He was accompanied by what appeared to be business associates, dressed in a black suit of devastating elegance, and he was scanning the room with the automatic assessment of someone who never fully relaxed in any space he did not control. His eyes moved across the gala, cataloging, evaluating. And then his eyes found Claire. What happened in that moment was difficult to describe with precision, because what passed across Cha Christian's face, what any careful observer would have noticed, was not indifference, was not the professional blankness or the cold dismissal that had defined his interactions with her. What moved through his expression was something that resembled weather, surprise, recognition, and then, before he could suppress it fully, something that could only be called arrested attention. The involuntary stopping of a mind that had encountered something it was not expecting. He looked at her the way people look at things they find beautiful when they have not prepared themselves not to. It lasted perhaps 3 seconds. Then the shutters came down, harder than usual, as if the brief lapse required extra punishment, and he looked away and moved on. Claire turned back to Mr. Lee and continued the conversation. And if her heart was doing something undisciplined inside her chest, that was entirely her own business and entirely inconvenient and entirely beside the point. Later that evening, Claire was standing near the exhibition wall that displayed examples of the arts education program's student work. Beautiful, joyful pieces by children learning that creativity was their inheritance, when she felt him approach. Not heard, felt. She turned before he spoke. He was standing close enough that she had to tilt her face upward to meet his eyes. 6'8" of him, and she was 5'7" in heels, and he was looking at her with an expression she could not read. The professional blankness was there, the fortress, but something in the architecture of his stillness suggested effort. Like the blankness required more construction than usual. "Your event design work has been effective," he said, a compliment delivered with the same tonality most people used for weather reports. "Thank you," she said. A silence. In that silence, Claire became acutely aware of several things simultaneously. The extraordinary quality of his cologne, which was somehow both commanding and understated. The precise cut of his suit, which was extraordinary even by the standards of the room they were standing in. The way he was looking at her, not through her, which was his custom, but at her. And the way that change of preposition felt absurdly like the difference between being invisible and being seen. "The Bajogakent collection," he said. "Your 3rd revision." "Yes." "The weight balance in the structured pieces is still off. The kente cloth requires a different internal construction to support the pleating you're attempting." Claire stared at him. He had read her 3rd revision. He had read it closely enough to identify a genuine technical issue she had been wrestling with herself. "I've been considering a different interfacing approach," she said carefully. "Layered rather than single weight." "That would work," he said, as if they were simply two professionals discussing a technical problem, as if the previous 3 months of deliberate dismissal had not happened. Then his phone rang. He answered it immediately, turned slightly away, and within moments was deep in a conversation about something entirely unrelated. By the time the call ended, a business associate had claimed his attention, and he moved away without another word, without acknowledgement, without any indication that the previous exchange had occurred. Claire stood by the exhibition wall for a moment longer. Something had shifted, and she could not decide if the shift was dangerous or simply interesting. The man who had spent 3 months looking through her had just looked at her, really looked, and the feeling that created was something her mother's voice did not have guidance for. What happened next happened quickly, the way significant things often do. Not the long, cinematic slow burn, but the sudden ignition of elements that have been building toward combustion without announcing their intention. It was a Wednesday. Claire knew it was Wednesday because she had a fabric delivery expected and had rearranged her schedule specifically to be present when it arrived. She was in the sample room when Ms. Park came to find her with an expression that communicated the universe had decided to complicate things further. "Mr. Cha wants to see the full Hanu collection concept presentations," she said. "All directions, including yours, today, in an hour." Claire looked at her. "Today." "Today," Ms. Park paused. "He specifically requested your presence. He used your name. He doesn't usually use first names." Claire spent the next 45 minutes organizing her materials with the focused calm of someone defusing a bomb. Her concept board, her research documentation, her technical sketches, her fabric samples. The full weight of everything she had built over 3 months, assembled into an hour's worth of presentation. The room for the presentation was smaller than the boardroom, more intimate. Just Cha Christian, Ms. Park, and 2 senior designers. The reduced audience somehow felt more exposing, not less. The other designers presented first. Their concepts were accomplished, professional, safe. The kind of work that would translate beautifully to Korean consumers who knew exactly what they were expecting and wanted it delivered with impeccable technical execution. Then it was Claire's turn. She stood, she breathed. Her mother's voice, "You belong here." She presented for 22 minutes. She spoke about the technical research, the cultural documentation, the market analysis, the specific construction approaches she had developed to honor both textile traditions without subordinating either to the other. She showed the physical fabric samples and explained the tactile conversation between them. She demonstrated the proportion work in her sketches and explained the decisions behind each line. When she finished, she waited. Cha Christian had not taken his eyes off her presentation for 22 minutes. He had watched with that total, focused attention that was his most fundamental operating mode. The sealed, fortress expression was still in place, but beneath it, around the edges, something was happening. "Questions?" Claire asked. One of the senior designers asked about the production timeline. She answered. The other asked about the price point. She answered. Ms. Park asked nothing because she had already heard the full concept and was watching Cha Christian's face with the expression of someone watching a very slow, very important door begin to open. Cha Christian was quiet for a long moment after the questions ended. Then he said, "The construction approach for the traditional hanbok-structured pieces. Walk me through the decision to use hand stitching rather than modern techniques at the seam points." Not a challenge, a genuine question. The difference was audible. Claire walked him through it. The decision to honor the traditional construction at the seam points was deliberate. It was the place where the 2 traditions would physically meet, where kente weave and Korean silk would touch, and she had wanted that meeting to carry the weight and care that a genuine cultural conversation deserved, not the efficiency of industrial production. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet again. "Approved," he said. "Full development. I want the complete collection concept on my desk by the end of the month." The room exhaled. Ms. Park met Claire's eyes across the table, and her expression contained a carefully suppressed version of the internal dancing Claire's ribcage had already started. "Thank you," Claire said to Cha Christian, professional and measured. He nodded once, stood, and as he moved toward the door, he paused with his hand on the frame and said, without turning back, "The hand-stitching decision is right. It's the kind of choice that reveals whether a designer understands what they're making or only knows how to make it." Then he was gone. Claire stood in that room for a moment after he left, and the feeling in her chest was something complex, professional satisfaction, certainly, but also something more confusing, because she had been dismissed and then acknowledged by the same man, in cycles, in a pattern she could not yet fully read. And the part of her that had been raised to read rooms for self-protection was trying to understand what this pattern meant and whether it was safe. The part of her that was apparently, inconveniently, beginning to have feelings about Cha Christian's dark eyes and his involuntary wonder and his unexpected technical precision was suggesting she stop analyzing and simply see what happened next. She told that part of herself to be patient. That part of her, as it turned out, had no patience whatsoever. The following weeks were the best of Claire's time at Christian Holdings and the most confusing. The Hanu collection work consumed her in the best possible way, technically demanding, creatively expansive, the kind of project where she fell asleep thinking about fabric weights and woke up with solutions already forming. Ms. Park was generous and involved, the senior designers increasingly collaborative once the project had Cha Christian's endorsement. And Cha Christian himself became a presence in her work in a way that was both professional and deeply unsettling. He reviewed her progress twice weekly, not casually, with the total, focused attention that was his most fundamental operating mode. He asked questions that revealed he had been reading everything she submitted, thinking about it between their meetings, arriving with specific observations that no one could generate without genuine engagement. He was not warm. He was never warm. He delivered criticism with the precision of a surgical instrument and compliments, when they came, which was rare, with the same tonality he used for everything else. But there was something in his sustained attention that felt different from anything Claire had experienced professionally, like being the object of a very serious, very demanding respect. What she was not prepared for was the afternoon he came to the design studio while she was working and had no professional reason to be there. She knew this because he did not bring documents, did not reference project materials. He stood in the doorway, which he had done before, but this time his hands were empty and his expression was doing something she had never seen it do, hesitating. Cha Christian's face never hesitated. "The Kente sourcing," he said finally. "The artisan in Kumasi, what's their name?" She looked at him. "My uncle's studio, why?" Something moved across his face. "Christian Holdings is expanding its ethical sourcing partnerships. I wanted to know if the studio operates at the scale that would allow for a commercial relationship." It was plausible. It was entirely plausible. And it was also, Claire understood with a clarity that surprised her, not entirely the reason he was standing in her doorway with empty hands and an expression that was doing something new. "I can get you the information," she said. "Good." He did not move. "Your family is in Ghana." "Accra, yes." "You speak Twi, in addition to English and Korean." It was not a question. "Yes." "Do you find it difficult?" he said, and then stopped, started again, being the only one in the room. The question arrived like a stone dropped into still water, unexpectedly, immediate, radiating outward. Claire looked at him directly. "Every day," she said simply. He held her gaze for a moment that felt longer than it was. Then he nodded, once, and left. She sat with that exchange for a long time after he was gone, because it was the first question he had ever asked her that had nothing to do with fabric or construction or business. The first time he had asked her something that was, unmistakably, about the experience of being her. Claire told Adaeze about it on their weekly call that night. "He's interested in you," Adaeze said immediately. She had never in her life buried a lead. "He's observing me. There's a difference." "Those are the same thing with men who don't know how to feel things normally," Adaeze said. "Claire, he asked about your family. He asked about your daily experience. That man is not asking about sourcing partnerships." "He's complicated," Claire said. "All the interesting ones are," Adaeze said. "Just be careful. You can't pour yourself into someone who's going to keep dropping you." She was right. Claire knew she was right, and she was careful. She was very, very careful. The collection development was 3 months in when the professional relationship between Cha Christian and Claire began, inevitably, to develop edges that were not purely professional. It happened in small ways first. He began staying longer in the design studio review sessions, not demanding more explanation, but asking questions that moved gradually from technical to conceptual to something more personal, more philosophical. What did Claire understand about the relationship between tradition and innovation that a Korean designer might not? What was it like to grow up, surrounded by a textile tradition that was still functionally alive in daily culture, rather than preserved in museums? These were genuine questions. She answered them genuinely, because she had been raised to bring the full weight of herself to every room, and these questions deserved real answers. And as she answered, Something happened to Cha Christian's face that he was likely unaware of. The fortress developed small, involuntary gaps. The sealed quality, that museum-behind-glass impression, developed fractures around the edges where something warmer pressed through. Not often, not dramatically, but undeniably. He was a man, trying very hard not to feel something he was feeling anyway. Claire understood this, because she was doing the same thing. What she felt for Cha Christian was inconvenient and complicated and probably inadvisable, and it had nothing to do with his extraordinary face or his devastating physical presence, though none of those things were difficult to notice. What she felt for him was something that had built slowly, through the medium of work, through watching the way he engaged with creative problems, through understanding the seriousness and depth of his professional commitment, through the rare moments when something genuine broke through the construction of his control. She was falling for the person she glimpsed underneath the fortress, which was either very intuitive or very foolish, and she genuinely did not know which.